Namaste. Sit comfortably and prepare for our practice as we begin to explore Manomaya kosha and the mind field, looking towards bringing a balance between opposite sensations and dualistic experience. And sit with the spine straight and let the skin hang heavily over the bones. Feel the head gently rest on the cervical spine. The vertebrae stack neatly, one upon the other, as you maintain the natural curves of the spine. Feel the hips and knees succumb to gravity as they relax into the earth. Scan the body from head to toes and toes to head, noticing all the crevices, any area where the energy is vibrating, and soften those places. Relax any effort now. Move your awareness to the upper lip and the air that's located there. Follow the sensation of the inhalation across the nostrils. Notice the feel and the touch of the breath as it travels over the nasal passages, down the throat, and expands into the lungs. Watch the lungs and muscles of the rib cage relax at the beginning of the exhalation, and observe the breath move up the throat, over the nasal passages, and through the nostrils. You may like to station your awareness at the nose, mindfully observing each breath. Without any control, without any interference. Notice how the body breathes itself. Travel now from the nostrils up into the nasal passages, all the way to the top of the nasal passages and into the center of the head. And now as you breathe, breathe in and out of this third eye space. It's as if the breath is cleansing and purifying the pineal gland. Feel the pineal gland being cleansed and purified with the breath. And consequently, the inner mind becomes more clear and open. And as you breathe, notice what the mind is doing. Notice how the mind feels, how the space inside the head feels. Pay now particular attention to where your desires are in this moment. What is the mind reaching towards? What is it grasping for? Examine what the mind is craving in this moment. Remaining as the detached witness and just noticing. Do not force or judge what the mind is desiring in this moment. Just follow it. Now come back to the very center of the head. Breath washing over the third eye space. And notice now what the mind is avoiding. What the mind may be pushing away. It may be a simple thought. That is being withheld in the effort of staying concentrated in meditation. Whatever it is, just notice What is the mind working itself around and avoiding in this moment? And now come back to the center point of the head, the space just above the roof of the mouth. Breath washing over and over. And from this space, observe both what the mind is reaching towards as well as what it is avoiding, and hold both within this space now. Observe the mind's unique ability to remain equanimous, balanced, distanced from opposing desires and aversions. Revel in its ability to hold the space for such a wide spectrum of emotions and dualistic sensations. The ability to remain tranquil and serene, peaceful and immovable amidst all the storms and sunshine that may enter our awareness. Rest now in perfect equanimity. Slowly come back to the breath washing over the third eye. Natural breath moves in and out through the nose. Seated, and resting firmly on the earth. Bring awareness to hands and feet, legs and arms, the torso, the heart beating in the chest. Slowly bring hands to heart center. Prepare with a deep inhale for Om. Namaste. Okay, here we arrive at Manomaya Kosha, the opposite sensations practice. So remember, Manomaya Kosha is the level of the mind. So even more subtle than the prana is the mind. Let's take a look at this Manomaya Kosha, characteristics and purpose. So here, the goal is to spontaneously awaken an inner state of sensation without the actual external stimuli. We are using this practice to stimulate the sensory nerve centers in the brain. And so there are 6 main sensations that we'll use in this practice. The first 2 are heavy and light, which correspond to the mechanoreceptors in the brain. The third and fourth are hot and cold, which stimulates the thermoreceptors in the brain. Of course, these are the receptors that are sensitive to temperature change and help us to regulate our body temperature. And then the last 2 are pain and pleasure, which stimulate the nanoreceptors in the brain. So this practice of activating, for example, the heavy light sensation it's registering the pressure change in the body via the mechanoreceptors. So when we're awakening these heavy light experiences, there's a profound effect on the brain, because even though there's not the actual physical external stimuli causing this sensation of heaviness or lightness, the centers in the brain are still being activated and registering pressure change simply by bringing our attention to this sensation. And when we're activating those receptors, we're bringing attention to those parts of the brain that are constantly at work. So the body is constantly, the brain is constantly working to keep the body in a state of homeostasis. And so by bringing the attention to these specific areas in the brain, what we're doing is massaging those areas of the brain and bringing them to homeostasis and balance. So we're taking the practitioner, or ourselves if we're practicing, from a state of duality to a state of balance. Now, the pairs of opposites are used to help resolve repressed feelings, emotions, and memories that would otherwise disrupt our waking state. So, when we feel an uncomfortable emotion arise, we tend to avoid it. We tend to run away or push it away. And Yoga Nidra helps to bring these uncomfortable emotions up in a safe space where there's no reactivity, because remember, the nervous system is relaxed, so that we can fully feel them rather than react from a fight or flight sympathetic response. The parasympathetic state eliminates reactivity, so we can just sit back and witness what is happening rather than being a participant in it. And so there's an opportunity to experience the fullness of the emotional body without the story maker, without the experiencer. So in the normal waking state, we're constantly focused on duality, on desire and aversion. I want this, I don't want that. And in Yoga Nidra, the body becomes a safe platform to experience duality and come to equanimity with it. Because both duality and equanimity are necessary for our life experience. And emotions are also necessary, even emotions that we may think we don't want, like anger. Anger is there so we know what's not okay. So we are aware of what we feel very passionate about. It's only when emotions become habitual that they might be signaling a more deeply seated samskara or impression that's trapped within the body. So in Yoga Nidra, all experience is allowed and it's safe, because as humans, we're meant to feel the opposites and we're meant to feel the extremes. And from a non reactive state, we're able to see that and feel that this is okay, right? Because we can become the witness, we can come into the equanimity state, and we can feel that it's okay for these emotions to be there. And so when we can respond without the reactivity, without the defensiveness and the unconsciousness, this process of Yoga Nidra helps us to reclaim these pockets of repression and aversion. So when emotions and feelings arise just as they are, they move naturally through the stages of birth, growth, decay, and death, and always dissolve back into the home ground of pure awareness. And so that's what this practice of opposite sensations helps us to achieve from a balanced and harmonious state. So let's take a look at what's happening in the brain here. So we're in the limbic brain, the emotional brain. The hypothalamus is monitoring changes in the internal and external environment. The amygdala is the place that stores our emotions. And the temporal lobes are associated with our memory. Of course, the cerebellum is where our subconscious, our stored impressions are held. And so when there's stimulation of the amygdala, where the emotions are, without a reaction, then it promotes a calm state during stressful moments in waking life. So when a trigger, let's say, causes an emotion in our waking life, then this training that we do within Yoga Nidra is actually teaching our brain how to remain calm during those triggers. Okay. And the other thing that's happening is that these, as I mentioned in the last slide, these impressions can be cleared as they're experienced just as they are in a relaxed state. And so these subconscious impressions, these samskaras, then are able to we're able to process them, to experience them without the reaction, that knee-jerk reaction that we otherwise would have in a waking state. What we need to remember when we're practicing, well, first of all, activating these sensors without the stimuli can be a bit of a challenge. So be gentle with yourself. If the sensation does not occur spontaneously, it will come with practice. You always want to remain as the witness of the experience, removed from the story and the emotional charge behind it. And finally, holding opposite sensations at the same time requires great intelligence of the nervous system. So, when asked to, for example, experience heat and then cold and then both at the same time, it takes a very advanced and intelligent nervous system to do this. And when you do this, you become that equanimous force, that non-dual state. That is your natural state. Because from the natural state, we can experience the extremes without being involved in them. Here are the most common examples used. We talked about in the first slide, heavy and light, hot and cold, pain and pleasure. And there are other opposites that you can use as you develop your own Yoga Nidra script. So here are some other examples: happy and sad, anger and joy, shame and praise, jealousy and admiration, success and failure, health and sickness, happiness and sorrow, and even life and death. And so when it comes to teaching the opposite sensations, you will cater your script to your student. So if you're doing one-on-one with someone, you can bring up very specific sensations to what they're experiencing. So for example, the brain is constantly registering pain. So some people may not be able to experience pleasure, feeling that they are unworthy, they're not deserving, or the pleasure may feel like pain. So it can be extremely healing if guided in a safe way. This physical, emotional pain and pleasure. You can identify comfort and discomfort. You can go into it and isolate it as a sensation. And you can use the mind to locate previous experience of it and awaken it in real time. So you may take the practitioner into a memory of pain, for example. Then once you've gotten them into the feeling sensation of whatever sensation it is that you're using, like the pain, then you'll have them let go of the memory and simply feel the aliveness of that feeling inside of you, and to meet it with all of your attention and be very present with it. So it's the perfect place to call in these experiences because you're in a very relaxed state. And so there's an opportunity to invite awareness back into it rather than fleeing from it. And remember, the body is the perfect platform for it to be integrated back into so that the energy can flow more freely rather than being blocked or suppressed to some degree. So, this ability to awaken inner sensations without the external stimuli, remember, is a high degree of mastery of this system. And so, very healthy balancing practice for all. In ancient India, the yogis would sit around 5 blazing fires in the middle of Indian summer, and they would begin to gain mastery over the autonomic nervous system by turning on the temperature receptors for cold. So they're not being influenced by their external environment, and they have the ability to spontaneously awaken an internal state without the environment dictating it. So when the body remains in the position of Shavasana, and we begin to awaken these emotional states that in the waking state would fire off the sympathetic nervous system. But here we're in the parasympathetic nervous system and awakening anger or fear, awakening the yang response in a yin body is extremely intelligent. It eliminates the reactivity, which pulls you into the ahamkara, the I-ness, or the ego. So now you can separate the I-ness, you can separate the I maker, and hold the experience isolated to know it as it is, as energy. Then the body and the nervous system is being trained so that in a waking state, when we feel these strong experiences, we're able to be with it as it is for much longer. We're able to pause and separate ourselves from whatever the emotion is. So our body is an ally for processing these emotions. It takes about 90 seconds for a strong emotion to process through the body. So if it's taking any longer than 90 seconds, then the mind has become involved in keeping the story alive and keeping the emotional centers online. That is to say that the emotions chemical soup runs through the body in 90 seconds. And so if we can stay with it unattached, just letting the energy run through, then the body can process it without getting involved with the story. So in the waking state, when you're feeling a strong emotion, because of this practice, you're able to direct your attention to the sensation of it. Notice where it's feeling, where you're feeling it in the body. What does it feel like? So rather than trying to soothe yourself with your intellect, direct it to a feeling sensation within the body and realize it for what it is. It's just energies moving through the body. And if we can let the body be okay, everything's allowed to move through, then it's healthy because we won't get stuck in the samskaras. The energy will flow freely throughout the system. So the secret is to understand that the body is our ally. And when it's in a relaxed state, we can bring forward some of these complicated processes, things that we can't process in a waking state, and just be with it. Welcome it and feel it in its true essence as sensation, not story. Those big feelings tend to scare us, but it's okay to feel everything. In a stressful state, it might be off limits because we can't process anything at that time. But once we're in the right system, the parasympathetic nervous system, we're free to invite and receive and accept everything. Love can be painful, overwhelming, or uncomfortable. Pleasure can be seen as shameful in some cultures. And this gives us an opportunity to recalibrate and invite pleasure back into our lives and let it be allowed. We can bring in any emotions or sensations or concepts here that are sitting in duality and pair them with their opposite to come into a state of equanimity with it. Whatever is hard to be with on the surface, because the eye maker is so strong, we can bring it into Nidra when we're disconnected from the I-ness and feel it, just feel it inside the body. And so as you're bringing people into the feeling state, you can ask people to imagine or visualize. For example, imagine you're lying on a block of ice. Your whole body is becoming frozen with ice. Goosebumps are covering the skin. Just be sure if you're calling in the visual, it's to use it long enough just to spark the inner sensation. And then you want the student to drop the visualization. It's just in the effort of accessing the part of the brain that feeds the visual. So we want to get farther beyond the visual, into those receptors in the brain. And the sensations that you choose to use can vary depending on your student population. Using 3 sets of opposites is a good guide here, and you can refer back to the previous slide for ideas of opposite sensations to use. Next up is Vijnanamaya Kosha, the rapid visualization portion of Yoga Nidra. So let's close here with the sound of Om. Hands at the heart, deep breath in to begin. Namaste.